Welcome back, everybody. For today's deep dive, we're going to be tackling a pretty famous piece of Japanese literature.
Yeah, pretty famous.
Ryunosuke Akutagawa's Rashomon. It's
Definitely a classic.
It's a short story, but wow, it is.
It's impactful.
Yeah, impactful is a good word for it. I mean, just thinking about it now still gives me chills.
I know what you mean.
So, for anyone who hasn't read it yet.
Or maybe needs a little refresher.
Yeah, refresher. Get ready to have your mind blown a little bit.
Yeah.
This story really digs deep into some pretty
Dark.
Yeah, definitely some dark places in human nature.
And the setting doesn't help.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, picture this Kyoto in like the worst possible state you can imagine.
Famine, natural disasters.
And a total societal breakdown.
Yeah, it's like the city's on the verge of collapse.
Exactly. And on top of all that, you've got the Rashomon Gate itself.
Oh, yeah, that gate.
Which used to be this grand, impressive structure.
Right, but now it's just this
crumbling ruin.
Yeah, basically. It's almost like a character in itself, though. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It's like a physical representation of all the decay and lawlessness.
The moral rot.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
And that's just the setting.
Right. We haven't even gotten to the characters yet.
Buckle up.
Yeah, seriously. So we start with this servant, right?
Just been dismissed by his master.
Talk about a bad day, right? Terrible timing.
The worst. And he finds himself at this Rashomon Gate.
Of all places.
Stuck in a downpour.
Nowhere to go, no food, no money.
And the only way he can think of to survive is...
to turn to crime.
Potentially. So, I mean, what would you do in that situation?
It's a tough question.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you've got this guy who's desperate.
Just trying to survive.
But on the other hand...
is resorting to crime ever really justified?
And that's what Akutagawa really forces us to think about.
Right, from the get-go.
It's like he's asking what happens to our morals when everything falls apart.
When society breaks down.
When we're pushed to our absolute limit.
Yeah, makes you think, definitely. And just when you think it can't get any worse.
It does.
Oh, yeah. Our poor servant stumbles upon something truly disturbing inside the gate's tower.
And this is where things get really interesting.
So he's seeking shelter from the storm, right?
Trying to stay dry.
And what does he find?
An old woman.
Up in the tower.
Surrounded by corpses.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that part. There are corpses.
Lots of them.
And the old woman is doing what?
Plucking their hair?
Yeah, plucking hair from dead bodies.
It's pretty creepy.
To say the least.
It's a scene that stays with you.
Definitely. And it's not just the imagery. It's
the way Akutagawa described it.
It's so visceral you can practically smell the decay.
And feel the dampness of the tower.
It's so vivid.
It's masterful writing.
It really is. And it completely flips the script on us.
Because we go from feeling sorry for the servant to...
being completely horrified by what he's found.
And it's about to get even more complicated.
Oh, yeah. Because this old woman...
she's got a story.
And it's not what you'd expect.
Not at all.
So stay tuned, because we're about to dive into the old woman's justification for...
her rather unusual actions.
You could say that. Okay, so we've got this servant who's already considering a life of crime, and then he walks in on this old woman...
surrounded by dead bodies.
Plucking their hair.
Yeah, it's not exactly a pick-me-up.
You could say that. So what's her excuse? Why is she doing this?
Well, at first the servant is just horrified, right?
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be?
Seriously. But then the old woman starts talking.
Yeah.
She tries to justify her actions. She talks about how everyone is just trying to survive.
Like she's not the only one doing bad things.
Exactly. She even brings up this story about a woman.
The one whose hair she's plucking?
Yeah, that one. She claims this woman sold dried snake meat disguised as fish.
During a plague.
Yeah, pretty messed up, right?
That's awful.
Mm.
So basically she's saying, look, I'm not a saint, but I'm no worse than anyone else.
Right, everyone's got their hustle.
But is that really a valid justification, though?
It's tricky, because on one hand, you can kind of understand where she's coming from.
I mean, she's desperate.
Times are tough.
But on the other hand, stealing from the dead.
It's pretty taboo.
To say the least. And it makes you wonder.
Is she telling the truth?
Right? Do we even know if that story about the snake meat is real?
We only have her word for it.
So maybe she's just trying to manipulate the servant.
Maybe. Or maybe she really believes her actions are justified.
I mean, it's possible.
We all have our own ways of rationalizing things.
True. But the point is, Akutagawa forces us to confront these questions.
Head on.
He doesn't give us easy answers.
And that's what makes this story so compelling.
So unsettling.
Exactly. It stays with you.
So what happens next? What does the servant do?
Well, you might expect him to be outraged. right?
Yeah, maybe try to stop her.
But he doesn't.
He doesn't.
Nope, instead he robs her.
He robs her. Wait, seriously?
Yep, he takes her clothes.
But why?
He claims he needs them to survive.
To stay warm.
Yeah, he's using the same logic as the old woman.
That survival justifies anything.
It's like a twisted mirror image.
It's insane. So the servant, who was initially disgusted by the old woman's actions,
Ends up doing something just as bad.
if not worse.
It's a pretty bleak commentary on human nature.
For sure. And it gets to the heart of what this story is really about.
The darkness that can lurk inside all of us.
The potential for cruelty.
Even when we think we're being righteous.
Yeah. And then Akutagawa just ends the story.
Abruptly.
Like that we don't know what happens to the servant.
Or the old woman.
We're just left with this feeling of unease.
This sense of moral ambiguity.
Like even in the darkest of times.
There are no easy answers.
Just hard choices.
And the consequences that come with them.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so we've talked about the characters and their motivations.
But there's another layer to this story.
Oh, yeah.
The symbolism.
Right, because this story is packed with symbolism.
It's everywhere you look.
Like the rain, for example.
The constant rain.
It's relentless.
It's like a symbol of the misery and hardship.
The never-ending cycle of suffering.
Exactly. And then there's the Rashomon Gate itself.
Which we talked about a little bit earlier.
But it's worth mentioning again.
Because it's such a powerful symbol.
Of a society in decay.
Of the collapse of order and morality.
And the fact that our story takes place here.
It's no coincidence.
Akutagawa chose this setting for a reason.
To highlight the fragility of civilization.
How easily things can fall apart.
And then, of course, there's the Rashomon effect.
Ah, yes, the Rashomon effect.
Which is named after this story.
And for good reason.
Because it perfectly illustrates the idea.
That truth is subjective.
That there are multiple perspectives.
And that sometimes it's impossible to know what really happened.
It's like that saying, history is written by the victors.
Exactly. And Rashomon shows us that even in seemingly straightforward situations,
the truth can be elusive.
And our perceptions are often shaped by our own biases.
Our experiences.
Our desires.
Even our fears.
So Rashomon isn't just a story.
It's a challenge.
To our assumptions about morality.
About truth.
About the nature of reality itself.
Wow. This deep dive is getting pretty deep.
I know, right? But that's the beauty of this story.
It makes you think.
It makes you question.
It makes you uncomfortable.
And it stays with you long after you've finished reading it.
I think one thing that's really sticking with me after all this...
Besides the image of the old woman and the corpses.
Yeah, besides that, it's just that feeling of unease. Like, the world can be a pretty dark place.
It definitely can. Rashomon doesn't sugarcoat anything.
No, it doesn't. It's brutal. But I think that's what makes it so powerful.
It forces us to confront the darkness. The parts of ourselves that we'd rather not acknowledge.
And the idea that maybe there isn't always a clear right and wrong.
That's the Rashomon effect in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, what is truth anyway?
Is there even such a thing as objective truth?
Or is it all just a matter of perspective?
And if that's the case, then what does that mean for morality?
For justice.
For how we understand the world?
It's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It really is. And I think that's why this story has resonated with people for so long.
Because it asks these big questions, these fundamental questions about human nature.
And it doesn't give us easy answers.
It just leaves us with this lingering sense of unease.
And the challenge to figure things out for ourselves.
So for a listener who might be new to Rashomon, what's the one thing you'd want them to take away from this deep dive?
That's a good question. I think I'd say this Rashomon isn't just a story. It's an experience. It's a journey into the darkest corners of the human psyche.
And it's a reminder that sometimes the most unsettling truths are the ones we find within ourselves.
Exactly. So go read the story, experience it for yourself, and then ask yourself, what would I have done in that situation? What choices would I have made?
And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Another one down.
As always, it's been a pleasure exploring these complex ideas with you.
Likewise.
And to our listener, thanks for joining us on this journey.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into...
who knows what fascinating topic.
Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep those minds open.